We're here with Beth Breeze from the Centre on Philanthropy at the University of Kent. Beth, tell us about the Centre's work.
Sure. Well, it's only been set up recently in the last year or so we're just getting going, and there's a bunch of academics in 5 different universities around the country who are all beginning to basically create a field in the study of giving and philanthropy. There's a thriving field in America, and there's plenty of other disciplines that have looked at it in the UK, so economists and historians and so on. But we think this is the first time that people who come from a background perhaps more suited to looking at philanthropy and giving and the role it plays in people's lives has had the funding and the time to commit to that. So it's exciting days, but it's early days, and hopefully in the time period of the Centre from 2008 to 2013, a lot of fundraisers will come to see our reports and hopefully find it useful in their work.
And what are the main strands of your research?
Well, my particular area at the University of Kent is looking at what we call the distributional consequences of philanthropy. And by that we mean we're not so much looking at how much and what kinds of people, the demographic side and the number crunching side. Other colleagues are doing that. But what I've always been fascinated by since my early days as a fundraiser is how people decide what to give to. So our question is really to where does it go, and how do donors make those decisions when confronted by so many different great causes and opportunities to spend their money philanthropically. How do they choose between the arts and welfare and education, and then within that, how do they choose which charity is the one that they will have the best experience with, which sometimes is to do with how well they'll use their money or what kind of relationship they'll have with them and so on. So they're the kind of things I'm looking at, and pretty much every day I'm doing telephone interviews with donors and getting to ask these great questions, which as a fundraiser you'd love to have asked, but you can't because they're a potential donor to your cause. But as somebody based in a university, not trying to make an ask, but simply trying to create information and knowledge about giving, I can prod a bit further and ask all those kind of questions that hopefully fundraisers want to know the answers to, like what turns them on and off an appeal, what makes them stay with a cause in the long run, or what makes them stop a bit earlier, and so on. So that's a particularly interesting one. And just to give you a sneak preview, that report will be coming out hopefully by Christmas time. But what we're finding really is that assumptions that people choose things on the basis of what's the most urgent or the greatest need out there actually are not really so true, so much as people say, well, what am I passionate about? I mean, fundraisers know this, so but other people don't know this. They think it's needs driven, whereas really it's taste driven. So I have people say to me, well, I love bird watching, so of course I support the RSPB. Or, a wonderful guy I was talking to recently said, I'd give my last penny to a maltreated dog. He said, but nothing to cats. I just don't like cats. And I think it's trying to understand that very, very taste-driven personal side of what the role that charity plays in people's lives that hopefully will be useful. And
some of your research is focused on major donors, on £1 million giving. Tell us more about that.
Well, when we began the Centre, it's a great luxury to have the Centre and to have funding to do research in this area, but being honest, it's still not a huge amount of money over not a particularly long period of time. So we thought, well, where are the biggest gaps? What needs to be filled most? And NCVO and CAF do great work bringing out an annual survey, the individual giving survey, which tells us really what's happening with giving at sort of the normal end of life, where 99% of us are. So we know how much money has been given by ordinary non-rich people and to what causes. But what I felt we didn't know was the very, very top end. A simple question like how many people gave £1 million or more last year? No one had the answer to that. And even if you could roughly pick a figure out of the air and say, well, a few hundred probably, well, to what? And are they giving 1 million or are they giving 100 million? And what happens year on year? Do they do it once and never do it again? And so those are the kind of questions that I wanted to tackle because I felt it was the biggest gap in the knowledge. So we brought out the first £1 million donor report last November, which I think was fine, but it was the first time and we didn't necessarily get all the information because people didn't know what we were going to do with it. But I'm very hopeful that having got that report out and people have read it and seem to find it useful, that each year on year we'll get a more comprehensive coverage. So we're about halfway through the data collection for this year, and again a sneak preview. I suppose one of the interesting findings is a definite rise in anonymous giving, which has been found in the US, but it's interesting to see that it's happening here too. And I think that's definitely recession related. People don't want to shout about the fact they can still afford to give £1 million or more when so many of their fellow citizens don't have that kind of money. But also some other reasons are to do with the fact that if you stop giving to some of your charities, you don't necessarily want the ones that got cut off the list. You're still giving to the others, so they're being given anonymously. And then the third explanation is it's probably something around people trying out new charities. So perhaps they've always been, supporting the arts, say, but they've given their first $1 million to a welfare agency, maybe dealing with homelessness or debt counselling, something new, recession related, but they're not necessarily going to stick with it, so they're doing it anonymously, so that there's no hopes raised, I suppose, that this is a donor that you've caught and going to keep for a long time. So that's the kind of things that's coming out of this year's study, but that will also be launched in about November. So we've got 2 big studies coming out towards the end of this year.
And where can we find out more about your research?
We have, I think, a very good website at Kent, where we put all our research, we put all our media work, our PowerPoints and talk slides and everything that we do, because I firmly believe that as a tax-funded organisation, it's not ours to hold to ourselves, so it's all publicly available. And you can find that on the Kent University website, which is www.kent.ac.uk/SSPSSR for Sociology, Social Policy, Social Research /CPHSJ, which is Centre for Philanthropy, Humanitarianism and Social Justice. I'm sorry, it's really very long, but there it is. kent.ac.uk/SSPSSR/CPHSJ.
Beth Breeze, thank you very much.